When a school nurse notices a first-grade boy who refuses to sit down during class, standing at his desk hour after hour despite his teacher's repeated requests, something about his pained expression begins to deeply concern her. What started as a behavioral issue quickly reveals itself as a silent cry for help that had been overlooked for weeks. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes the smallest observations can lead to the most important interventions, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. She couldn't have known that her gentle persistence would uncover a dangerous situation hidden behind closed doors, until she discovered the first unmistakable sign that changed everything. Diane Morgan had been the school nurse at Lakeshore Elementary for nearly 12 years. At 41, her calm demeanor and genuine warmth had earned her the trust of both students and staff in the small suburban school district. With her auburn hair typically secured in a practical bob and compassionate brown eyes that missed very little, Nurse Morgan, as she was known to the nearly 400 children under her care, created a health office where even the most anxious children felt safe during moments of illness or injury. Beyond simply treating scrapes and fevers, Diane had developed a reputation for noticing patterns that others missed, often identifying underlying health concerns before they became serious issues. Her small but efficiently organized office was located just off the main hallway, its walls painted a calming blue and decorated with child-friendly health posters and artwork from grateful students. A privacy screen sectioned off the examination area from the rest of the room, and a small cot with bright, clean linens stood ready for children needing rest. The space smelled faintly of antiseptic, but Diane worked hard to make it feel more welcoming than clinical, keeping a collection of stuffed animals on hand to comfort younger children and maintaining a small treasure chest of stickers and pencils for brave patients. Diane lived in a comfortable home about 15 minutes from the school with her husband James, a high school science teacher, and their teenage daughter Emily. Their son Michael was away at college studying nursing, inspired by his mother's career. The family had deep roots in the community, with Diane having grown up just one town over before returning to the area after completing her nursing degree. Her connections throughout the district made her particularly effective at coordinating care between school, home, and local medical providers. Principal Eleanor Wright valued Diane's contributions beyond basic health care. "You see the whole child," she had told Diane during a recent staff appreciation event. "You understand that physical well-being is connected to emotional and academic success, and that insight makes you an essential part of our educational team." Diane had accepted the praise with characteristic modesty, though she did take pride in her holistic approach to student health. School counselor Robert Chin had become one of Diane's closest colleagues at Lakeshore. They frequently collaborated on cases where physical symptoms intersected with emotional or behavioral concerns. Robert respected Diane's medical expertise, while she valued his psychological insights. "Between the two of us," he often joked, "we can usually figure out if a stomach ache is about biology or a math test." There had been discussions at recent staff meetings about the district's growing population and the strain it placed on support services. Budget constraints meant that Diane split her time between Lakeshore and another elementary school in the district, limiting her availability at each location. The counseling department faced similar challenges, with Robert managing an increasingly large caseload. These limitations sometimes made it difficult to provide the comprehensive care that both professionals believed students deserve. One Wednesday morning in late September, Diane had encountered an unfamiliar woman speaking with Principal Wright outside the front office. The woman, who she later learned was Dr. Valerie Carter, a new pediatrician who had recently opened a practice in the community, had smiled warmly when introduced, expressing interest in establishing connections with local schools. There was something genuinely caring in her approach that resonated with Diane, who immediately recognized a potential ally in caring for Lakeshore students. Early autumn had brought crisp mornings and golden afternoons to the small town of Lakeshore, with leaves just beginning to hint at the colorful display to come. The elementary school, a single-story brick building surrounded by well-maintained playgrounds and athletic fields, buzzed with the energy of a new academic year now fully underway. Inside, classrooms hummed with activity as students and teachers settled into familiar routines, the initial excitement of back-to-school gradually transitioning into the steady rhythm of daily learning. It was during this season of settling in that Diane first noticed something unusual about Jamie Wilson, a first grader in Miss Peterson's class. The 6-year-old boy was of average height and build for his age, with tousled blonde hair and serious blue eyes that seemed older than his years. His file indicated no significant health concerns beyond mild seasonal allergies, and he had passed his vision and hearing screenings at the beginning of the year without issues. But nothing could prepare Diane for the mystery that would unfold around Jamie's refusal to sit down. The first time Diane really took notice was during a routine classroom visit to discuss proper hand-washing techniques as part of the school's illness prevention program. While the other children sat cross-legged on the colorful rug during her presentation, Jamie remained standing at the back, shifting his weight from foot to foot with what appeared to be discomfort. "Jamie, would you like to sit with your friends?" Diane had asked gently, assuming he might be feeling left out. The boy had shaken his head quickly, his expression tightening. "I'm okay standing," he'd replied, his voice barely audible. Miss Peterson had caught Diane's eye with a subtle look of frustration. "Jamie prefers to stand lately," she explained after the presentation as the children lined up for lunch. "It's been going on for about 2 weeks now. At first, I thought it was just excess energy. You know how some kids struggle to sit still. But he stands all day, even during story time when everyone else is comfortable on the rug." Diane's professional interest was immediately piqued. "All day? Even during desk work?" "Yes," the teacher confirmed. "He does all his work standing at his desk. I've tried everything: gentle reminders, offering different seating options like cushions or the wobble stool, even a behavior chart with rewards for sitting. Nothing works. When I insist, he becomes anxious and tearful, which isn't like him at all. He was a model student last month." "Has he mentioned why he won't sit?" Diane asked, her nurse's mind already cataloging potential causes, from medical issues to sensory sensitivities. Miss Peterson shook her head. "He just says he can't. I've asked if he's hurt or uncomfortable, but he just clams up. I called his mother last week, but she seemed dismissive. Said he sits fine at home and I shouldn't make a big deal about it." This information added another dimension to Diane's concern. In her experience, sudden behavioral changes in young children were rarely arbitrary, especially when accompanied by signs of distress. "I'd like to check in with him," she decided. "It might be nothing, but better to rule out any physical issues." Later that day, Diane arranged for Jamie to come to her office during his class's computer time, framing it as a routine health check rather than a response to his standing behavior to avoid causing additional anxiety. "Hi, Jamie," she greeted him warmly as he entered her office with obvious reluctance. "I'm just checking in with some of our first graders to see how they're feeling now that school's been in session for a while. Would that be okay?" The boy nodded hesitantly, his eyes darting around the room as if seeking escape routes. "I noticed during my visit to your class that you were standing during the presentation," Diane said conversationally as she checked his temperature with an ear thermometer. "Do you prefer standing to sitting these days?" Jamie's body tensed visibly. "Standing is better," he said simply, his expression closing like a drawn curtain. Diane proceeded with standard health assessment measures, checking his vision again, looking in his ears and throat, listening to his heart and lungs. Throughout the examination, she maintained casual conversation about neutral topics, his favorite subjects, books he enjoyed, the upcoming fall festival, seeking to build rapport and trust. "Jamie, I'm going to ask you some questions about how your body feels, and I want you to answer as honestly as you can. Okay?" she said after completing the basic check. "This is private between you and me, like all visits to the nurse." The child nodded, though wariness remained in his posture. "Are you having any pain anywhere in your body?" Diane asked directly. Jamie's eyes dropped to the floor. After a long moment, he gave a barely perceptible nod. "Can you show me where it hurts?" she asked gently. The boy hesitated, then pointed vaguely toward his lower body without speaking. Alarm bells began ringing in Diane's mind, though she kept her expression neutral and voice calm. "Is that why it's hard to sit down in class?" Another tiny nod. "How did you get hurt there, Jamie?" she asked, careful to keep any hint of accusation from her tone. "I fell," he whispered. the response coming too quickly and with a rehearsed quality that Diane had unfortunately encountered before in cases of potential abuse. "It must have been a pretty bad fall to make sitting so uncomfortable for so long," she observed, giving him an opportunity to elaborate. "I'm not supposed to talk about it," Jamie replied, his voice dropping even lower. "It's a secret." The phrase, "it's a secret," in conjunction with an injury a child was reluctant to discuss, raised Diane's concerns to a critical level. As a mandated reporter, she knew additional steps were now necessary, though she needed to proceed with great care to maintain Jamie's trust. "Sometimes," she said gently, "if an injury is making it hard for you to sit and learn at school, it's important for a doctor to check it and make sure it's healing properly. Would it be okay if we had a doctor take a look to help you feel better?" Fear flashed across Jamie's face. "Will it hurt more? Will they be mad?" "Who would be mad, Jamie?" Diane asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Dad," the boy whispered, tears filling his eyes. "And Mama will cry again." With these words, a clearer picture began forming in Diane's mind, though she needed proper medical documentation before formal steps could be taken. Balancing her duty to report suspected abuse with the need to handle the situation sensitively, Diane made a decision. "Jamie, I'm going to call your mom and ask her to take you to see a doctor today," she explained. "Not because you're in trouble, but because I care about you and want to make sure you're not hurting anymore. Would that be okay?" After a moment's hesitation, Jamie nodded, relief visibly mixing with apprehension on his young face. But nothing could have prepared Diane for the resistance she would encounter or the shocking discovery that would follow. When Diane called Jamie's mother, Karen Wilson, the woman's initial response was defensive. "He's fine," she insisted. "Boys get minor injuries all the time. It's probably just a bruise from playing rough." "Mrs. Wilson," Diane replied firmly but respectfully, "Jamie has been unable to sit down for approximately 3 weeks now. That suggests an injury that requires medical attention. As the school nurse, I'm recommending an immediate medical evaluation." "We don't have time for a doctor's appointment today," Karen countered. "My husband works late, and I don't have transportation right now." Recognizing potential barriers rather than simple resistance, Diane shifted her approach. "The school can help with transportation if needed. And Dr. Carter at the new pediatric clinic downtown has assured us she can see students on short notice when there's a concern." She paused before adding, "I want to work with you to make sure Jamie gets the care he needs. But this evaluation does need to happen today." The implied message, that this was not optional and could involve authorities if refused, seemed to register with Karen. After a heavy silence, she agreed to meet them at the pediatric clinic after school. Diane arranged for Jamie to remain in her office for the rest of the day, allowing him to rest on the cot when he grew tired of standing. She contacted Dr. Carter to explain the situation and her concerns, ensuring the pediatrician was prepared for what might be a complicated case. When school ended, Diane drove Jamie to the clinic herself, having obtained proper permission and following district protocols for such situations. Karen Wilson was waiting in the parking lot, her expression a complex mix of worry, defensiveness, and what appeared to be genuine fear. "Mrs. Wilson," Diane greeted her, keeping her tone professional but compassionate. "Thank you for meeting us. Dr. Carter is expecting Jamie." Inside the clinic, the nurse's suspicions were quickly confirmed. After examining Jamie in private, Dr. Carter documented extensive bruising in various stages of healing across his buttocks and upper thighs, injuries inconsistent with normal childhood falls or play but highly consistent with deliberate physical punishment using an object like a belt or paddle. When confronted with the medical evidence, Karen Wilson broke down in tears. The story that emerged was both heartbreaking and all too common. Jamie's father had been physically disciplining the boy with increasing severity over minor infractions. The most recent beating, administered with a leather belt for spilling a drink, had been so harsh that sitting had become unbearably painful for the child. Karen, herself a victim of her husband's controlling and sometimes violent behavior, had been too afraid to seek medical help or intervene. "He says it's discipline, not abuse," she explained through tears. "That his father raised him the same way and he turned out fine when Jamie couldn't sit at dinner last week." Robert said he was just being dramatic and needed to toughen up. The revelation required immediate action. Dr. Carter, also a mandated reporter, contacted Child Protective Services while Diane remained with Karen and Jamie in the examination room, offering support and explaining the necessary next steps. Within hours, a CPS caseworker had arrived and initiated formal proceedings to ensure Jamie's safety. The investigation moved quickly once medical documentation confirmed the abuse. Jamie and his mother were placed in emergency alternative housing, while a protective order was filed against Robert Wilson. Initial interviews revealed that the abuse had been escalating over the past 6 months, with Karen also suffering from emotional and occasional physical abuse, though she had been reluctant to acknowledge the situation even to herself. For Diane, the days following her discovery were emotionally draining but affirming of her professional instincts. She worked closely with Robert Chun to develop a support plan for Jamie's return to school, creating a safe environment where he could begin to heal both physically and emotionally. She also coordinated with Dr. Carter and the CPS team to ensure comprehensive medical and psychological care for both Jamie and his mother. "You likely saved that child from much worse harm," Dr. Carter told her during a follow-up meeting. "These cases typically escalate without intervention." The fact that he refused to sit rather than disclosing the abuse directly is textbook. Children often communicate through behavior when they've been warned not to tell. The ripple effects of Jamie's case extended beyond his individual situation. The incident prompted Principal Wright to accelerate implementation of a new district-wide training program on recognizing signs of physical abuse, a program Diane was asked to help develop based on her experience. Teachers and staff would receive more comprehensive education on identifying subtle behavioral changes that might indicate abuse or neglect. 2 weeks after the initial discovery, Jamie returned to school. The physical injuries had begun to heal, allowing him to sit comfortably again, though Diane knew the emotional recovery would take much longer. She arranged for him to check in with her briefly each morning, establishing a routine that provided consistent support while allowing him to maintain normalcy with his classmates. During one such check-in, about a month after the intervention, Jamie handed Diane a drawing he had made. It showed 2 figures, a small boy and a woman with what appeared to be a nurse's cap, holding hands. "That's you and me," he explained solemnly, "when you helped me not hurt anymore." The simple artwork, with its profound message of trust and gratitude, brought tears to Diane's eyes. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," she told him, "and I'm so proud of how brave you've been." Jamie studied her face for a moment before asking the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Will I have to go back to live with my dad?" Diane chose her words carefully, balancing honesty with reassurance. "Right now, the most important thing is keeping you safe while your dad gets help with his anger. There are special people working with your mom and dad to figure out what's best for everyone in your family." What she didn't share was that Robert Wilson had been ordered to complete an intensive intervention program for abusive parents, and that reunification, if it occurred at all, would happen only after extensive therapeutic work and under close supervision. Karen had filed for divorce and was receiving support through a local domestic violence program, gaining strength and independence with each passing week. As autumn turned to winter, Jamie's progress continued steadily. He participated fully in class activities, no longer standing out as the boy who couldn't sit down. Regular counseling sessions with Robert Chin helped him process his experiences and develop healthy coping strategies. Most notably, he began forming friendships that had been difficult for him earlier in the year when pain and fear had consumed so much of his energy. The case had profound effects on the school community as well. The enhanced training program helped staff identify 2 other potential abuse situations before they escalated to serious harm. The administration created more flexible scheduling to ensure Diane could spend additional days at Lakeshore rather than dividing her time so severely between schools. And a new partnership with Dr. Carter's clinic established expedited referral procedures for students needing immediate medical evaluation. By spring, approximately 6 months after Diane had first noticed Jamie's refusal to sit, a significant milestone was reached. The court granted full custody to Karen, with Robert allowed only supervised visitation after completing his intervention program and demonstrating meaningful change. More importantly, from Diane's perspective, Jamie had transformed from a withdrawn, frightened child to an engaged, increasingly confident student who no longer defined himself by his traumatic experiences. During the school's Spring Wellness Fair, an event Diane organized annually, she invited various community health partners to provide information and resources to families. Dr. Carter attended, staffing a booth on pediatric wellness that included discrete materials about recognizing and reporting suspected child abuse. "We've had 3 families reach out through the information you provided at Jamie's school," the pediatrician told Diane during a quiet moment. "People who had concerns but weren't sure what to do. That's 3 more children who might get help before a situation becomes critical." This ripple effect, the increased awareness and enhanced response systems that had developed from one case, represented the broader impact of Diane's attentiveness. What had begun as a simple observation about a child standing instead of sitting had catalyzed positive changes throughout the community's approach to child safety. The most profound transformation, however, was evident in Jamie himself. As the school year approached its end, Ms. Peterson asked students to complete a writing assignment about what they had learned that year. Jamie's response, which the teacher later shared with Diane with permission, was powerful in its simplicity. "I learned that some secrets are not good to keep. I learned that grown-ups can help even when other grown-ups make bad choices. I learned that being hurt isn't my fault. And I learned that telling the truth makes things better even when it's scary." The wisdom in these words, earned through difficult experience rather than simple instruction, moved both educators deeply. It reflected not just individual healing but the restoration of something essential that abuse often destroys: a child's trust in adults to protect rather than harm them. A year after Diane had first noticed Jamie standing uncomfortably at the back of his classroom, she received news that would bring the journey full circle. Karen Wilson had been offered a position as a parent advocate with the same domestic violence program that had supported her through her own crisis. Her lived experience, combined with the strength she had developed while protecting her son, made her uniquely qualified to help other mothers facing similar circumstances. "Jamie's so proud," Karen told Diane during a school event. "He tells everyone his mom helps families be safe, just like Nurse Morgan helped us." The comparison touched Diane deeply. In her 12 years as a school nurse, she had intervened in numerous situations, but few had demonstrated so clearly the power of simply paying attention to a child's nonverbal communication. Jamie's refusal to sit a behavior that might have been dismissed as defiance or stubborn misbehavior had been his only available means of signaling distress in a situation where direct disclosure had been forbidden. On the last day of school, Jamie stopped by the health office, a place that had once represented his first step toward safety and now was simply part of his normal school experience. He carried a small gift bag that he presented to Diane with shy pride. "Mom helped me pick it out," he explained as she opened the package to find a decorative pin shaped like a lighthouse. "She said you were like a lighthouse for us when things were really dark. You helped show the way to somewhere safe." The metaphor, profound in its simplicity, captured exactly what Diane had always hoped her role would be for the children under her care. Not just bandaging scrapes and checking temperatures, but truly seeing them, noticing the small signs that might indicate bigger problems and guiding them toward help when necessary. As Jamie prepared to leave for summer vacation, heading to a day camp program he was actually excited about, rather than dreading as he had the previous year, Diane reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with one simple, persistent observation: a little boy who wouldn't sit down. The physical injuries had healed completely months ago. The emotional healing had progressed remarkably, though she knew this would be an ongoing process for both Jamie and his mother. Most importantly, the cycle of abuse had been broken, offering Jamie the opportunity to grow up understanding that real strength comes from kindness and protection, not fear and control. The following September, when Jamie returned as a confident second grader, Diane noticed him immediately sitting comfortably at his desk in his new classroom, raising his hand eagerly to answer questions. No longer the child who stood apart in pain and silence. She watched through the classroom door for a moment, witnessing the ordinary miracle of a child simply being a child, learning, growing, and feeling safe in his environment. Recovery hadn't been instant for Jamie or his mother. The physical wounds had healed more quickly than the psychological ones, but with consistent support and appropriate interventions, both had found their way to a healthier future. The systems, too, had changed: new protocols, better training, increased awareness. Small but significant steps toward ensuring that other children would not suffer in silence, that other subtle signs would not go unnoticed. As Diane returned to her office to prepare for another day of caring for Lakeshore students, she carried with her the lighthouse pin, now attached to her ID badge, a daily reminder of why small observations matter, why persistent curiosity about changes in behavior can literally save lives, and why creating an environment where children feel safe to share their true experiences is among the most important work any educator can do. Not an ending, but a new beginning for Jamie, for his mother, and for a school community more attuned to the silent signals that children sometimes use when words are too frightening or forbidden. A reminder that healing is possible when caring adults simply pay attention to the behaviors that speak louder than words. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more. When a school counselor, Mr. Harris, notices 8-year-old Liam always wearing his heavy winter coat, zipped to his chin, even on the warmest days, it strikes him as more than just a child's odd quirk. It was a wall, a shield Liam refused to lower for anyone, an unspoken declaration that clung to the boy like a second skin, stifling and out of place in the bright, airy halls of Northwood Elementary. The coat, a bulky, dark blue parka, became an emblem of Liam's silent, isolated world. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe that every child deserves a safe space, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. David Harris was a man in his late 40s. His receding hairline and the tired lines around his kind eyes speaking of countless hours spent listening to the anxieties and joys of young children. He moved with a gentle purposefulness, his voice rarely rising above a calm, reassuring tone. His office, a small haven tucked away from the main bustle of the school, smelled faintly of lemon polish and the comforting scent of old books. He believed in the resilience of children, but he also knew their profound vulnerability. Liam, a new student in Ms. Anya Sharma's third-grade class, had been on his radar almost from his first week. Not because of disruptive behavior, Liam was unnervingly quiet, but because of the coat. Always the coat. Ms. Sharma, a young, earnest teacher with a keen eye for her students' well-being, had been the first to express a gentle concern. "He just won't take it off, Mr. Harris," she'd said, her brow furrowed during one of their informal weekly check-ins. "Not for recess, not even when the classroom gets stuffy. He says he's cold." She was a good teacher, observant and compassionate, and David valued her insights. He hadn't yet spoken directly to Liam's parents or guardians. Miss Sharma had mentioned Liam lived with his mother and a newish stepfather, a Mr. Thompson. The initial school paperwork indicated no prior concerns. The antagonist in this unfolding drama, though David didn't know it yet, was Liam's stepfather, Mr. Marcus Thompson. Thompson was, by all outward appearances, a pillar of the community, a successful local businessman, charming, well-spoken, and a generous donor to school fundraisers. He cultivated an image of doting stepfather. David had seen him once, briefly, at a school open house a few weeks prior. Mr. Thompson had his arm around Liam's mother, a nervous-looking woman named Sarah, and spoke animatedly with Principal Davies. Liam had stood slightly apart, almost pressed against the wall, the heavy coat a dark blot against the cheerful classroom decorations. David had noted, with a fleeting sense of unease, how Mr. Thompson's smile didn't quite seem to reach his eyes when he glanced down at Liam, and how Liam had flinched, almost imperceptibly, when Thompson's hand had briefly rested on his shoulder. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of something dissonant in the man's otherwise smooth facade, but it had lodged itself in David's memory. Northwood Elementary, with its brightly painted murals and the constant thrum of youthful energy, was generally a place of cheerful order. The scent of floor wax, library books, and the faint, sweet aroma of cookies from the cafeteria on Fridays usually filled the air. David's office was meant to be an extension of that safety. But Liam's coat, and the boy's withdrawn silence, felt like a heavy, ominous cloud seeping into that carefully maintained atmosphere. David had seen Liam in the hallways, a small, solitary figure, always looking down. The hood of his parka often pulled low, obscuring his face. Other children, in their t-shirts and light sweaters, would sometimes glance at him curiously, but Liam seemed oblivious, lost in his own tightly contained world. David knew, with a growing certainty, that the coat was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a fortress, and he feared what it might be hiding. The initial referral from Ms. Sharma had been for social integration difficulties. Liam wasn't making friends, wasn't participating in class. "He just sits there, Mr. Harris," she'd explained, her voice laced with worry. "And he's so watchful. It's like he's always waiting for something bad to happen." David had scheduled his first session with Liam, a low-key, getting-to-know-you meeting. Liam had entered his office silently, the bulky coat making him seem even smaller, and sat rigidly on the edge of the child-sized chair. He'd answered David's gentle questions with monosyllables, his gaze fixed on the worn pattern of the carpet, his hands hidden deep within the coat's pockets. When David had casually remarked on the warmth of the room and suggested Liam might be more comfortable without his coat, the boy had frozen, his eyes darting up for a split second, wide with something that looked like sheer panic, before he mumbled, "No, I'm cold," and shrank further into the garment. The intensity of that brief flash of fear was the first undeniable, chilling confirmation for David that this was far more serious than a simple social adjustment issue. The coat wasn't just a comfort item. It was a shield against a perceived, or perhaps very real, threat. David's mind raced. The boy's visceral reaction to the suggestion of removing his coat was alarming. It went beyond shyness or a child's quirky habit. This was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. He thought back to Ms. Sharma's comments, Liam's watchful eyes, his constant state of being cold. He recalled the fleeting, unsettling image of Mr. Thompson at the open house, the stepfather's smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A cold knot began to form in David's stomach. He had to proceed carefully. Accusations, or even direct questioning of the parents at this stage, could backfire spectacularly, potentially placing Liam in greater danger if his fears were founded. He needed to understand. He needed to build trust with Liam, a monumental task given the boy's evident terror. Over the next few weeks, David saw Liam regularly. He kept the sessions low pressure, focusing on play therapy, using art supplies, building blocks, anything to create a non-threatening environment. Liam remained largely silent, his participation minimal. The coat stayed on, always zipped to his chin. David would often find himself staring at that damned coat, the dark blue nylon a constant, frustrating barrier. He noticed how Liam would instinctively hunch his shoulders if David's hand came too close, even in a gesture as innocuous as offering a crayon. He observed how Liam meticulously avoided any physical contact, however accidental, with other children in the hallways or the cafeteria. He never went to the nurse's office with the usual childhood scrapes or sniffles. Ms. Sharma reported that Liam often complained of stomach aches before gym class, successfully avoiding activities that might require changing clothes or more vigorous movement. David began to document everything meticulously. Liam's verbatim responses, mostly yes, no, or I don't know, his body language, his aversion to removing the coat, the dates of his sessions. He tried different approaches. He told stories, hoping Liam might identify with a character and open up. He used puppets. Nothing seemed to penetrate the wall of silence or the barrier of the coat. The silence in his office during their sessions was thick, heavy with unspoken things. David found himself increasingly preoccupied with Liam's case, his thoughts returning to the boy's haunted eyes even when he was at home, in his quiet apartment. The guardianship seed, if it existed, was his unwavering professional commitment, a deep-seated belief that it was his job to be a voice for children who couldn't speak for themselves. This was becoming more than a case. It was a consuming worry that gnawed at his peace of mind. One afternoon, David was walking past the school playground during recess. He saw Liam standing alone by the fence, away from the other children, his back to the lively games. Mr. Thompson was there, having apparently arrived early to pick Liam up. He was talking to another parent, laughing, his demeanor open and friendly. Then, he turned and called out to Liam, "Ready to go?" Champ? His voice was jovial, but as Liam slowly trudged towards him, David saw Thompson's smile fade slightly as he looked down at the boy. He said something too low for David to hear, and Liam flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, before nodding. Thompson then ruffled Liam's hair, a gesture that looked almost aggressive in its forcefulness, before guiding him towards the gate, his hand firmly on Liam's shoulder. David felt a chill despite the afternoon sun. This was the second micro-cameo of the antagonist, reinforcing David's unease. The man's public charm felt like a carefully constructed performance. The pressure on David was mounting. He felt he was failing Liam. Weeks were passing, and he was no closer to understanding what was happening, no closer to helping the boy. He discussed the case again with Ms. Sharma, sharing his growing alarm. "I just have this terrible feeling, Anya," he confessed, running a hand through his already thinning hair. His fear, "It's not normal." Anya, too, was increasingly concerned. She mentioned that Liam had started hoarding snacks from lunchtime, hiding them in his desk, then in the pockets of his coat. "It's like he's always hungry, but he barely eats what his mom packs him. And he's so jumpy." The other day, Mark, one of the louder boys, dropped a book near him, and Liam practically leapt out of his skin. He looked terrified. This new detail, the hoarding of food, added another layer to David's anxiety. It was another potential indicator of neglect or a fear of deprivation. David decided he needed to try a more direct, albeit still gentle, approach with Liam. During their next session, he didn't push about the coat immediately. He simply talked about feelings, about how sometimes kids feel scared or worried and don't know how to talk about it. Liam listened, his face impassive, hidden in the shadows of his hood. Then David said, "Liam, sometimes when people wear coats all the time, it's because they feel safer with it on. Or maybe," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "maybe there's something they don't want other people to see. Is there anything you're worried about, Liam? Anything at all you want to tell me?" For a moment, just a fleeting moment, Liam's eyes met his. David saw a flicker of something. Fear, yes, but also a desperate, pleading look. Then it was gone. The boy shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and looked back down at his shoes. "I'm just cold," he whispered, his voice barely audible. It was a dead end, another frustrating setback. David felt a wave of despair. The silence was a wall he couldn't seem to breach. His professional responsibility weighed heavily on him. The thought that Liam was suffering, and he couldn't reach him, was a torment. The following week, the school nurse, Mrs. Gable, a kind, matronly woman who had seen generations of children pass through Northwood, stopped David in the hallway. "Mr. Harris, a quick word about Liam?" she asked, her usually cheerful face etched with concern. "He came in today complaining of a headache. He looked awfully pale. I wanted to take his temperature properly. Asked him if he could just slip his coat off for a minute. You would have thought I'd asked him to jump off the roof. He got so agitated, started trembling. Said he couldn't, absolutely couldn't. I didn't push it, just took it under his arm over his sweater. He does wear a thin sweater under that big coat, you know. But his reaction, David, it was very unsettling. This was it. Another professional, another trusted colleague, witnessing the same extreme fear. It wasn't just David's perception. Liam's fear was real, palpable, and extreme. The stakes had just escalated significantly. This was no longer just a quiet concern. It was an active, alarming pattern observed by multiple staff members. This incident with Mrs. Gable felt like a critical turning point, a confirmation that David's instincts had been right all along. The hurt was not just emotional. It was very likely physical, hidden beneath that oppressive coat. The information from Mrs. Gable, coupled with his own weeks of fruitless attempts to connect with Liam, galvanized David. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to find a way to see what was under that coat. The risks of not knowing now seemed far greater than the risks of gently pushing a boundary for the child's own safety. He decided that in their next session, he would try one last time, with utmost gentleness but firm resolve, to understand the reason for the coat. He planned it carefully. He would ensure the office was warm, that Liam felt as safe as David could possibly make him feel. He rehearsed what he would say, trying to find words that were reassuring, not accusatory. He felt a tremor of apprehension. What if Liam had a complete meltdown? What if he was wrong? But the image of Liam's terrified eyes, the memory of his flinch when Mr. Thompson touched him, Mrs. Gable's report of his trembling, these pushed David forward. He had a legal and moral obligation to ensure Liam's well-being. The countdown to this crucial session felt heavy with foreboding. He felt he was on the brink of a terrible discovery, and the weight of that anticipation was immense. The day of their scheduled session arrived, a bright, deceptively cheerful spring morning. Liam entered David's office, the dark blue parka, as always, his oppressive shadow. He sat in his usual spot, small and silent. David began gently, talking about the sunny weather, asking about Liam's weekend. Liam offered his usual monosyllabic responses. David took a deep breath. "Liam," he said, his voice soft and calm, "we've talked a few times now, and I know you like to keep your coat on because you feel cold. But today I'm a little worried that you might be too warm with it on indoors. And sometimes, when we keep things hidden, those things can start to feel very heavy. I need to make sure you're okay, Liam. I need to make sure there's nothing hurting you under your coat." Liam stiffened. His breathing became shallow. He started to shake his head, his eyes wide with panic. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No, please. I can't." David's heart ached for the boy's evident terror, but he knew he couldn't back down. "Not now. It's okay, Liam. You're safe here with me," David said, keeping his voice even and soothing, though his own heart was pounding. "I just need to see. Just for a moment. I promise, I'll be very gentle." He moved his chair slightly closer, very slowly. Liam pressed himself back into his seat, his knuckles white as he clutched the edges of his coat. "Please, Mr. Harris," he pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "Don't. He'll be so mad." "He?" David asked gently. "Who will be mad, Liam?" Liam just shook his head frantically, tears now streaming down his pale cheeks, silent sobs racking his small frame. This was it. The terror was linked to a he. David knew with chilling certainty that he was about to uncover something awful. "Liam, I need to help you," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "And to do that, I need to see very slowly, with infinite care." David reached out towards the zipper tab at Liam's throat. Liam flinched violently but didn't pull away completely, as if paralyzed by fear and a tiny, desperate sliver of hope. His eyes were squeezed shut. David's fingers closed around the cold metal tab. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a silent prayer on his lips. Then, with a deep breath, he slowly, gently, pulled the zipper down. The coat fell open. David gasped, a sharp, horrified intake of breath that seemed to suck all the air from the room. His blood ran cold. Beneath the thin sweater Liam wore under the parka, his small torso was a horrifying canvas of bruises, ugly, discolored marks in various stages of healing, from angry purple and black to faded yellow-greens. Some were clearly finger-shaped. Around his thin upper arms, there were more darker, as if he'd been gripped with brutal force. And then David saw them, faint, older, silvery lines, the telltale signs of past injuries, poorly healed. It was a pattern of sustained, methodical abuse. The sheer extent of it, the silent chronicle of cruelty written on this child's small body, was staggering. For a moment, David was frozen, his mind struggling to process the horror. Liam was still sobbing, his small body shaking uncontrollably. David felt a wave of nausea, quickly followed by a surge of ice-cold rage directed at the unknown, he who had inflicted this. He forced himself to remain outwardly calm for Liam's sake. His training kicked in. Document, report, protect. He gently pulled the coat closed again, not zipping it, just covering the horrific evidence for a moment to shield Liam. "Liam," he said, his voice choked but steady, "you are so brave. You are so brave for letting me see. I am going to help you. You are safe now." His mind was racing. This was beyond school protocol. This was a 911 call. Immediately, he reached for his desk phone, his hand shaking. The pressure was immense, the need for immediate action paramount. He had to get Liam out of that abusive environment now. David Harris stood in his small, sunlit office, the cheerful posters of smiling animals and inspirational quotes on the walls a grotesque mockery of the horror he had just witnessed. Liam, small and trembling, was huddled on the child-sized sofa, the unzipped parka pooled around him like a deflated life raft. David's hand, still shaking, was on the receiver of his desk phone, the dial tone a shrill, insistent buzz in the suddenly suffocating silence. His mind replayed the image of those bruises, the chilling map of cruelty etched onto Liam's small frame. "He'll be so mad," Liam had whispered. The he had a name, David was certain, and that name was Marcus Thompson, the charming stepfather. He took a deep, steadying breath. His voice, when he spoke to the 911 dispatcher, was low and urgent, but remarkably calm, outlining the situation with professional precision. Suspected severe child abuse, victim on site, requesting immediate police and child protective services. He gave Liam's name, his age, and the school's address. Every word felt heavy, consequential. While they waited, an eternity condensed into minutes, David sat with Liam. He didn't press the boy for details, didn't ask questions. He simply sat, a quiet, reassuring presence. He found a soft blanket from his emergency kit and gently draped it over Liam's shoulders, tucking it around him. Liam leaned into the blanket, his sobs slowly subsiding into shuddering breaths. David's internal struggle was immense, a maelstrom of fury at the abuser, profound sorrow for Liam, and a desperate anxiety about the immediate next steps. He knew the arrival of uniformed officers could be terrifying for a child already so traumatized. He had to manage this to shield Liam as much as possible. The triumph was that Liam was now, finally, in a place where the truth was known, where help was imminent. The sacrifice was the peace of David's own composure, his professional detachment shattered by the raw, brutal reality of what he had seen. This would stay with him, he knew, long after Liam was physically safe. The arrival of 2 police officers and a calm, serious-faced woman from Child Protective Services, Ms. Albright, was swift. David met them at his office door, briefly explaining the situation again. His voice kept low. He emphasized Liam's extreme fear. Ms. Albright, her demeanor gentle but firm, was clearly experienced. She entered the office alone first, speaking softly to Liam, her voice a soothing murmur. David watched, his heart aching, as Liam, after a long, hesitant moment, looked up at her, his eyes wide and lost. The decisiveness of the authorities was a stark contrast to the earlier bureaucratic hesitations. The evidence under the coat was irrefutable. Liam was safe. The abuser, though not yet apprehended, was identified, his power broken by the simple act of unzipping a coat. Ms. Albright gently helped Liam into a fresh, soft shirt she had brought, the offending parka left discarded on the floor like a shed skin. The sight of Liam without the heavy coat, though his bruises were still a painful reality, felt like the first breath of fresh air after a long suffocation. This was the decisive turning point. Liam was physically separated from his symbol of torment and was now under official protection. David leaned against his office doorframe, the adrenaline ebbing, leaving him feeling hollowed out and profoundly weary. He watched as Ms. Albright gently led Liam out, the boy clutching a small, soft toy she had given him. Liam paused at the door and looked back at David, a fleeting, unreadable expression in his tear-swollen eyes. Then he was gone. David let out a long, shuddering breath, the tension of weeks, of that horrifying final discovery, finally releasing its grip. He felt tears pricking his own eyes, tears of relief, sorrow, and a deep, aching empathy for the little boy who had endured so much in silence. The school principal, Mrs. Davies, was immediately informed and was visibly shaken, pledging full cooperation. Detective Miller, one of the responding officers, assured David that an investigation into Mr. Thompson was already underway. "Your detailed notes, your quick action, Mr. Harris. You very likely saved this boy's life, or at least saved him from further severe harm," Miller said, his words a small comfort in the emotional wreckage. After this, the district superintendent is mandating immediate, comprehensive retraining for all staff on recognizing subtle signs of abuse and the updated reporting procedures. We're also pushing for better interagency communication. What you did has already triggered important systemic reviews. A few days later, Ms. Albright called David. Liam was in a safe emergency foster placement and was beginning to receive specialized therapy. He was, she said, slowly, tentatively, starting to speak about what he had endured. "He asked about you, Mr. Harris," Ms. Albright said. "He called you the talking man who was kind. He drew a picture. It's of you and him, and there's a big yellow sun. He's holding your hand." She sent a photo of the drawing to David's phone. It was crude, childlike, but the sentiment was overwhelmingly clear. A small figure labeled Emmy held the hand of a taller figure labeled Emma H, and above them, a bright, smiling sun. In that simple, poignant image, David understood. He hadn't just exposed a monster. He'd helped a little boy take the first faltering step towards reclaiming his childhood, towards believing in safety again. The first, fragile seeds of healing and trust were being sown, in crayon on cheap paper. David knew Liam's journey would be long and arduous. The scars, both seen and unseen, would take years to fade, perhaps a lifetime. But with dedicated support, professional therapy, and the profound relief of newfound safety, Liam's path toward healing had truly, finally, begun. The possibility of a future where Liam could feel secure, could play without fear, could simply be a child, felt real and attainable, a direct consequence of that terrible, necessary unzipping. David returned to his work, the rhythms of the school day gradually reasserting themselves. But something within him had shifted. His office, once just a place of work, now felt imbued with a deeper, more urgent sense of purpose. He found a quiet satisfaction in his daily interactions, his listening more attuned, his resolve to protect the vulnerable children in his care strengthened. His own quiet apartment felt a little less empty that evening, filled not with silence, but with the resonant echo of a child's life irrevocably changed for the better. Ms. Albright had mentioned the possibility of David playing an ongoing supportive role in Liam's life, perhaps as a consistent, friendly face, once things settled. The thought of that, of being a small beacon of stability for Liam, filled David with a quiet, unexpected warmth. It was the tentative, hopeful beginning of a new chapter of connection, born from a moment of profound darkness, now oriented firmly towards the light. He looked at the crayon drawing on his phone again, the smiling sun, the two figures holding hands. He felt a sense of earned peace, a profound understanding of his impact, and a quiet, hopeful anticipation for the future Liam's, and perhaps, in a small way, his own. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.